welcome back to Behind Enemy Lines with Mike and Terry. We have a very special guest today who I consider a friend from the communist state of Illinois. That's Mr. Aaron Delmar. So those of you from Illinois got to know Aaron. I mean, he's a very colorful figure throughout the state of Illinois. He is going to be Darren Bailey's lieutenant governor candidate. Um, uh, he's also the Cook County chairman, and he's a central committeeman, and he's going to share a little bit of why he got in the race, a little bit about his background, some of the challenges we have as Republicans, which is why the show is called Behind Enemy Lines. He's fighting a whole army of leftists with very little soldiers behind him. So we're going to hear about some of those challenges. And that's about it. We have a second guest. So Aaron's going to be on for about 45 minutes, and then we have Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Pierce that will be on for the last 15 minutes, and we'll be giving him a chance to share a little bit more about himself. He was on last time, and we had some
technical
technical
difficulties.
right there, Mike. So if
Yeah.
you have anything to say, Mike, let Aaron come in and share a little bit about his background, and we'll jump in.
Yeah, let's just get started with Aaron
Well,
now and then go from there.
well, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate having me on the show today. You know, I'll tell you, it's pretty simple. I mean, I got involved in politics in 2009. I was really unhappy with our city councilman. I decided to run against him. You know, the same story you hear a lot of people. You just get fed up. You had enough. He
Yep.
never thought he had a chance to lose, and I, introduced him to a constitutional republic here in Palatine, and that kind of kicked off my political career. I started, just being a regular councilman, just making sure to be a good public servant in my own hometown, and other people encouraged me to run for higher office, and one thing led to another. But really, that is the pinnacle of it is right now. For those of you that don't know me across the nation that are watching at home, I had originally planned on running for governor myself. I ran for lieutenant governor once before in 2022 with a great guy named Gary Rabine. And I had a wonderful running mate out of DuPage County named Christine McCloy. She was amazing. And had our petitions. We were getting ready to start a fundraising. We had everything you needed to have in order to run a statewide race. And I got a phone call from the campaign manager of Darren Bailey. And he said, "Hey, Aaron, Darren's running statewide again." And I said, "Great. Welcome to the race. Let's have it out." And he said, "Well, we think we should join campaigns." And I said, "Well, I appreciate that, but I already have a running mate." And he goes, "Well, that's not what we were thinking about. We were thinking about you being Darren's running mate." And I said, "Thanks, but no thanks. I've already been a lieutenant governor candidate. I know what that's like. Always being a bridesmaid, never being a bride." And, he's like, "Well, at least think about it." And I said, "Sure." I thought about it, and the answer is no. And I said, "Just out of curiosity, when you ran this by Darren, what did he think?" And he said, Darren said, "Heck no, too." And I go, "There you go." Because a lot of people don't realize that Darren and I have been very controversial frenemies for many years, throwing rocks at each other. Because Darren lives about 5 hours south of Chicago and downstate Southern Illinois, and I'm the Cook County Republican chairman. So there were a lot of things that, Darren and I really traded barbs at each other. And I got off the phone and I talked to my campaign manager and I said, "Do you hear this? Darren Bailey wants me to not run for governor. He wants me to be his running mate again." I go, the ball's in this guy to even consider that." And my campaign manager goes, "Well, what do you think?" And I think, "Well, what do you think?" He goes, "I think it would be an amazing team because you take a strong gubernatorial candidate from Southern Illinois, you mix him up with a strong gubernatorial candidate from Chicago, the Collar counties, and the city area." He goes, "Have you ever even heard of a team like that?" And I said, "I haven't, not just in Illinois, but across the nation." And he goes, "Maybe you should have a talk with him. Maybe you sit down with him because you've never met with Darren really." I said, "Sure." So I said, "All right, bring him up here. We'll talk for 45 minutes. But when those 45 minutes are up, I'm out of here." And Darren and Sydney came out, and I put my phone on the table, and we, set a clock for 45 minutes because I'm gonna get out of this room. It was like a timeshare, right? I didn't want to be in the room. And we ended up talking for 4 hours. And what we realized is that there was so much more that we had in common than what we had apart. And that, from a policy standpoint, from a conservative perspective, we were very much aligned. We just had people that are in our orbits that wanted to be divisive and wanted to split our party up and benefited from having a North and South fracture. And
Sure.
so I said, let's have a conversation about it. And we did. We went through everything. We went through every bit of pass, every comment. Darren endorsed my last two opponents against me. thankfully I beat them, but that doesn't leave a good feeling with you when you have a guy that wants to be your teammate and you know what I mean, just basically threw rocks at you for the last 3 years. And I talked to my running mate, Christina, and she was so graceful. She was amazing. She says, Aaron, you have to do it. This is an opportunity to unite the whole Illinois Republican Party, to unite our base. And, because she was so graceful about it and she was so kind, and she stepped aside, I said, Darren, let's do it. And we've been running. And we had an amazing kickoff. We got picked up in a helicopter, which I had never been in before, not knowing what the future would hold. And we went around the state. And it was immediately on our first stop, I knew there was something special here because we were down in Clarksville, Illinois, and we had about 115 people show up, all wearing Darren Bailey 2022 gear. And I had never seen, a turnout like that so early in the morning on a weekday, supporting a candidate that hadn't been on the ballot in a couple of years. And we went to our next stop in Bloomington, Illinois, and it was the same thing. And I got to know Darren a little bit more on the helicopter ride, and I got to know his son, Zach. Uh, for those of you that haven't been watching the news nationwide, Zach passed away last Wednesday in Montana.
Yeah.
He was there with his wife, his beautiful two children that were in the back, and they had a tragic helicopter accident. And that night when that happened, I got a phone call from the same campaign manager, Jose, and he said, Aaron, I need you to rally a plane. We need to call any contact that you have that's got a plane. Darren's got to get to Montana. And at first I thought it was a joke. I thought he was pulling my leg. And then I could hear the cracking of his voice and I could hear the intensity and just the sorrow already in there. And I said, well, what happened? Why does he need to be in Montana? He said, Zach was in an accident. We don't know what happened. And so we immediately started making phone calls from any of the people in my network that had a plane. And we told Darren that he needed to get to the closest airport so we could get him out of there, get him there. And I immediately called the sheriff in Ekalaka, Montana. And the lady confirmed to me that, there was an accident. Law enforcement had not gotten to the scene of that accident because it was in a pretty rural part of Montana up in the mountains.
Yeah.
And then, I'm calling Darren. We're trying to figure out what's the closest airport, help him get him out of there. And then I got the phone call that there were no survivors. And I called Darren and Cindy immediately, and they had gotten a call from the sheriff's department as well when I was talking to the secretary. And to hear Darren's stoic voice and being strong for Cindy, and hearing the sadness, the sob, the pain, the heart piercing pain of Cindy, certainly just beside herself over the loss that they had just found out about. I'll never forget that moment because, like I said, I was very new to the campaign and really very new to being with Darren and Cindy and just kind of starting the relationship at a brand new start.
Mhm.
And I was honored to be a part of switching our campaign over to working to figure out how to get them there, how to get the whole family out there, how to get everybody back, starting to work with the rest of the team, each of us taking a part and transitioning our roles from a campaign into being the Bailey Comfort team and the logistical force. And nobody even talked about the politics. We just talked about trying to comfort the family and set everything up. And that was exciting from a very sad point to be on a team that just clicked together and acted so fast. To work with a group of people that, we were up for 48 hours, figuring everything out, handling press, handling logistics. And I think it brought us all closer together to be a part of that. And now we're going to be having the funeral this Sunday and Monday, and coming down there and doing it. During the same time that this tragic accident happened, we had also during the weeks before put out word about our petitions. You to get on the ballot, you need 5,000 signatures to get on the ballot. And we had over 2,500 volunteers go out and get us about 14,000 signatures.
Wow.
And so the following week on Monday, I submitted those petitions down in Springfield. So that way, when Darren makes a decision of what he wants to do, he'll have a decision to be able to make, and the decision would be made for him. And just the last, again, month, meeting Zach on the helicopter, getting to know him, joking around with him, learning about how he got his pilot license because he was a missionary in South America. And they taught him how to fly so we could move medicine and food, to people that really needed it. To learn about his faith and learn about his commitment to Jesus and very much taking the same steps that his father did and learning more about the Bailey family outside of what you read in the papers and outside of the political barbs that we've thrown at each other and really getting to know the family and their soul and their heart. Um, it's really been eye opening and it's been an experience that I'll never forget, regardless of the outcome of the election. And it's going to be a big deal this weekend. We're going to get everybody together. We've gotten everything put together, and we're bringing the family back. Unfortunately, in Ekalaka, the airport's very small, so we can only bring one family member back at a time because of landing strip. You can't just land a Boeing in there. And to see the outpouring of the support, not only of the campaign of the Republican Party, but all people across Illinois and across the United States, I think that kind of dulled the blade just a little bit for the Baileys and for our team.
Sure.
And just having that experience there of going from launching and being so excited to just deep sorrow and grief for the loss of a beautiful family, and also learning about the support team that he had, and learning more about the Baileys, has just been really a roller coaster of peaks and valleys. But President Trump made a phone call to Darren on Saturday. I got to listen in on that, and that was really touching to hear the president of the United States take 25 minutes out of his day, to talk to a friend, to talk to somebody suffering, and give them that comfort that only a president can give.
Sure.
Really speaks volumes not only of the tragedy but of the president and of the relationship that Darren has with him. And so, whatever Darren decides to do as he, mourns his family, and the family has discussions and we as a team have discussions. If Darren decides that he wants to run, buckle up because we're going to run hard. But if he does choose to not run, I'll understand that and I'll stand by him regardless. Because the more that I've gotten to know the Baileys and spend time with them, they're just an amazing family. 5 generations on a farm. The kids are all within 15 miles. There
Mhm.
were 13 grandchildren, 11 survived me because what a lot of people really pulls on their heartstrings is that on that trip to Montana, the middle son, Finn, was not on the helicopter. He decided to get a ride back with one of their business partners because they were out there for a convention. They own an aeronautics company that does crop dusting with the helicopters, and so he survived. So right now, Darren and Cindy and the rest of the um, kids are working to figure out and plan Finn, and figure out what that's going to look like because Darren and Cindy have the guardianship of him. And so then we'll make a decision. And right now, politics aside, we're really working hard to make sure everything's perfect so we can all get together, so we can all mourn together and grieve, this beautiful family that we lost.
Yeah, man, it's going to be. God, I don't know how the family members can handle what's coming up this weekend.
That's right. I encourage everybody that has an opportunity to come down either on Sunday for the visitation. It's 1 to 5. It's in Flora, Illinois, and then Sunday it's going to be a big, very large outcome, and we're expecting several thousand people. We're going to stream it live because the Baileys have touched not just people in their immediate community, but people across Illinois, and people around the nation are now tuning in to see and to mourn again with them.
Mhm.
But, I don't wanna be a downer, I just wanted
Yeah,
to share that story because I think a
no,
lot of
I mean
people
it's
maybe
obviously
don't always
important.
appreciate it.
Yeah, it's
The hug your kids tonight, right?
yeah,
Say call your mom, call
Yeah.
your dad, tell them you love them because life is very fleeting.
yeah.
And in the Republican Party, it's unfortunate that it takes a thing like this to be able to unite the party,
Mhm.
right? So for so many times, and again, Darren and I are examples of the fighting, right? From a regional perspective, everybody in Cook County and the Collar counties thinks everybody downstate doesn't know anything, and everybody downstate thinks that the people out of Chicago are ruining everything, Republicans and Democrats alike.
Mhm.
And that's a major problem with our party. There's no support system. There's no infrastructure.
Yeah.
It's very challenging being a state central committeeman and working with the state party, and the apathy that they have for developing grassroots candidates, grassroots organizations, instead of insulating themselves in the incumbent protection program.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer in primaries. I think metal sharpens metal, and it gives everybody an opportunity to get better. If you're an incumbent, it makes you go out and talk to your constituents and learn about their issues firsthand. If you're a first-time candidate, or you're running, it forces you to go out and talk to your people, so that if you are elected, how you can represent them. And for far too many people in Illinois, it's about holding on to the power. It's been holding on to regional issues. You know, we're not cultivating a bench team, because
No.
anytime anybody comes out that's any kind of value or good or has the potential, they immediately suffocate them so they can't run against them or compete against them at a later time. And you know, you see that everywhere in the party. You know, unlike the Democrats, where they have so much power right now that if you run for an office, you run for state representative and you lose, they'll make you a judge, or they'll make you a commissioner in something, or they'll put you on some sort of board. Us as Republicans, we cannibalize each other, because we have
Yes.
so we're fighting over the scraps for any
Right.
kind of seat that we
Exactly.
have,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And that's before, you know, the national Democrats come in and gerrymander Illinois even worse, which they're talking about having Hakeem Jeffries coming in here and leaning on the Black Caucus. So they give up some of the African American seats to create another congressional seat so they can combat what's happening in some of the other states that aren't as gerrymandered as Illinois. And we have our governor getting on television and saying, well, Illinois is not gerrymandered. It's fair and free elections. Look, we're a 52-48 state, Republican to Democrat. We got 17 congressional seats, and only 3 of them are Republican. That's not representative of Illinois. We have 102 counties in Illinois. 97 of them are ruby red. It's just the concentration of population in the collars, that saturates the rest of Illinois, and makes it that blue state. That mixed with the just total discombobulation of our party and infrastructure and infighting makes it almost impossible to win. But I think that Darren and I have a great opportunity, because as we unite the party, as if you know, if we choose to run, you know, unity is not about agreeing on everything. It's about agreeing on the things that matter the most, and bringing two diverse individuals who don't necessarily agree on every issue because they come from different backgrounds and different ecosystems, and finding common ground, and really would be the first team that could govern the whole state, not just Chicago. You know,
Yeah.
Darren comes from a very much agricultural, rural area, and obviously I'm from Palatine and grew up in the city. And so when I was talking with Darren, I said, I go, you know, you're down in Clay County. How many drive-by shootings do you have? He goes, well, not very many, Aaron. And I go, that's right. But in Chicago, if you're on the south and west side of Chicago, you're just trying to get to school. You're trying to get to the grocery store. You're trying to get to work. You're trying to watch television without a bullet flying through your front window. You didn't talk about that in 22. We need to be talking about that now.
Mhm.
You know, Darren, you got good schools down in your area. There's a lot of area, you know, can you imagine in Illinois where a fourth grader could read at a fourth grade level?
Mhm.
It doesn't matter where you are in the state. Those are the same issues that we have everywhere. People want to be safe. People want to get their kids the opportunity when they graduate college or high school, pardon me, that if they go into the workforce, if they go into the military, if they go into trade school, or if they go on to college, that they're prepared to go wherever they want. I said, Darren, we're exporting our greatest asset in Illinois, and that's our children, because
Yep.
there's no opportunity here.
Yeah.
When your kid goes away to school and you know, sees what it's like at Indiana University or Iowa or Wisconsin, like there's a big chance they're not coming back.
Mhm.
And so we have to work on that. And I said, the last thing, and it doesn't matter if you're in Vermilion County, Sangamon County, Cook County, Will County, you know, is affordability. It's not just the taxes that are oppressive. It's the utility bills. It's every single thing. It's the taxes that you pay on top of taxes on top of taxes. You know, when you have a gas tax at $1.85, if gas was free, you're still paying $1.85, right?
Yeah.
They tax anything they can. They tax your zins. They tax your cigarettes. They tax your alcohol. You know what I mean? And because of the way that we can only get, you know, $20,000 off of our salt tax, state and local tax, we're taxed upon our tax. We can't even deduct our local taxes.
Mhm.
And look at what's happening right now in the veto session underneath this failed governor and the failed leaders of the Democratic Party and the far left. They're going to tax you $1.50 on every Uber that you want to get your pizza tax. Right. Well, do you know who's using the Ubers? It's people that aren't in a position to be able to go to the store because either they're handicapped or they have challenges or they have multiple children that they're watching and they can't bring 5 kids or 4 kids with. You're taxing your own people that you're trying to save. They're trying to raise transportation costs. They're passing another utility bill. Everybody else's utility bill went up by 30%. Let's tack another 20% on top of it. Let's tax your Netflix. You know what? Here's a great idea. Let's add a 5% billionaire tax to drive out the richest people in Illinois so they can go live in Florida or Texas or
Mhm.
Tennessee where they're not taxed.
Mhm.
I mean, every policy that is coming out of our governor and the mayor of Chicago is just driving people out of our state. And that doesn't matter where you are in our wonderful state.
Yeah.
That's happening. And when these people leave, what do they leave behind? They leave that tax burden. The taxes don't
Yeah.
go away. We just redistribute them to Terry and Mike and Aaron and everybody else, and it just gets worse and worse until the states finally break bankrupt, which I don't think is that far away.
No, it's not. I got
These
one
are the
other.
things that nobody's talking about because they're not fancy. They're not talking about as much social. You'll see, Darren and I have they, people know us already. We don't need to be spending money on name ID. You know Darren's commitment to his faith. You know mine. You know our commitment to the conservative movement. That we're going to govern that way because those conservative governing principles have been successful in a multitude of states across United States, and the proof's in the pudding. It works. Those are the issues that I think that are going to attract suburban moms, that are going to attract people in the Southwest Chicago that have been deserted. I
Mhm.
mean, Terry, you talk about illegal immigrants all the time. If either of you've ever been to a White Sox game or a Cubs game, and you sit there and you think that the friendly confines of Wrigley are completely full. Every seat has a button in it. That's how many illegal immigrants have come into Chicago.
Mhm.
And
Wow.
if you live on the southwest side of Chicago and you've been told for decades that there's no resources for playgrounds or education or mental health or or regular health, right? If you don't have health insurance, and then all of a sudden you bring in 65,000 illegal immigrants coming into Chicago, and
Mhm.
they magically find $2.5
Mhm.
billion dollars to be able to house and feed everyone. We're not even taking care of our own people first. When you have
Yeah.
125,000 emergency 911 calls that are not getting answered because of the increased crime rate and the reduction in police and the reduction of 911 call centers. Think about that for a second, Mike. If your father is having a heart attack and you need 911 and nobody answers, right? If Terry, if your wife falls down the stairs and she breaks her back, or you know what I mean, and you need a 911 call and nobody answers. If there's a active shooter going on in a school or going on in the street and nobody's answering the 911 call, well, how is that America,
Yeah.
right? So we're going to start making a lot of inroads into those areas because the Democrats have deserted their own people, and it's an opportunity for them to come over to our side.
Yeah, let me I wanna
These are the
I
types
wanna
of issues.
I wanna make one quick comment to add to what you just said. I got I get FOIAs all the time, right? I just got Chicago Fire Department FOIAs for, like, the Inn of Chicago. So I got all the criminal they had 300 police reports, incident reports in 1 year. And I had a friend in Chicago Fire Department, he goes, "Terry, you should go get FOIAs for Chicago Fire Department." The Inn of Chicago, which is one of 27 shelters back in the day. I just got them back this morning. 500 times in 18 months, the Chicago Fire Department was called to one location, and add that to the 400 police calls in that same time frame. We don't know what that cost is. They're not going to tell us. That's above and beyond all the stuff that they're sharing with the amount of money that they spent is way more than what they said. And then, to your point, they got 911 calls to this illegal immigrant shelter, right? And police officers, which is spreading them thin amongst the citizens that are paying for these people.
Well, the other thing too they're not reporting on is how many people after in 2022 that left the police force that took early retirement and the lack of replacements for them,
Mhm.
right? That there's nobody that wants to be a cop. And I was talking to a friend of mine who was a Chicago police officer for over 30 years, and I said, why is everybody retiring? Why are they there? He's like, Aaron,
Yeah.
if somebody shoots somebody and we have to pursue it, here's what happens. They shoot me, I go to the morgue. I shoot them, I go to jail. We're not going to go enforce it. We don't have the support of leadership. So you've got over 1,900 positions that are in the city of Chicago that have not been filled, right? We're outnumbered. We're understaffed. Brandon Johnson is the worst mayor in the United States. He's
Mhm.
at a 6% approval rating, right? And I think that's high to begin with. He's passing legislation ramrodding, increasing all of the taxes and property taxes, and he's beholden to Chicago Teachers Union.
Yeah.
And they don't even want to educate people. I'll give you a great example. In the big beautiful bill that got passed by President Trump, there was legislation that was included that would create a fund where if you donated $1,000 to an empowerment fund, that you'd get $1,000 tax credit. So basically, you get your money back.
Mhm.
That money is then all pooled together, and if your state opts in, that money goes to underprivileged kids that can pick a school they want to go to. So JB Pritzker right now could send
Yeah.
a letter to the White House opting in And all of these kids that are on the southwest side of Chicago could go to private school, they could be homeschooled, they could have any kind of education opportunity that really wanted. And that was something that we had in Illinois, but J.B. Pritzker never renewed it because he was beholden to the teachers union, and they pushed it up
Yeah.
because they want to artificially inflate the enrollment by using illegal immigrants that are coming into the schools, and they're not educating somebody. I mean, if your classroom was 30-1 before, now it's 45-1. You're not able to get a quality education from that schools, but they're
Yeah.
taking those dollars. Half the schools are empty. Enrollment, artificially is inflated. But even with the artificial inflation, it's still low compared to where they've been in previous years. They're not even at 1996 levels, if you get that, because of the mass exodus. And
Well,
when they talk about crime safer, it's not really safer. They're underreporting a lot of the crimes.
Big time.
well, yeah.
Right, they're not
We're
reporting
dropping the
They're,
charges. They're down.
well,
I just saw a
because
thing earlier today where they're downgrading trafficking, what would normally have been trafficking charges, to possession for a number of deadly drugs. When you guys are already facing a fentanyl crisis in Chicago, not that the rest of the country isn't too, but you guys are really getting hit hard with OD, increased numbers of overdoses. People, kids buying marijuana, thinking they're going to go, smoke on the weekends with their friends, and it's laced with fentanyl, and you end up with 3 dead bodies, and nothing's being done about it. I mean, that's really the problem. Is when you have these soft on crime policies or this catch and release, no bail, you're just putting these criminals back out into these communities where they're going to harm more people. You're making it worse for the communities you're pretending to help.
Yeah,
you hit it on the head, Mike. You couldn't have said it any better. And really, these are the issues that I think are going to be important across the state. And that's why I think Darren and I mean, our team, should we run, has the only 2 candidates that have run statewide before. Darren getting endorsed by President Trump and winning in 22, and me being Ron Gary Rabine. You have geographically representation of the whole state from Southern Illinois to Northern Illinois. I look at some of the other candidates and their teams, and I think they're all great people. Let me say that. I think Jim Medrick is a strong conservative, but a good man. And I think that, Ted Dabrowski is a good man as well, even though I don't necessarily care for the people that he surrounds himself with. But when you look at their running mates and we look at their team, there's not really a team. I think a lot of this, some of this really is, should anybody else get elected? Who's ready to govern? Darren and I are ready to govern immediately. Darren served in the House. He served in the Senate. I've served on, on statewide boards. I've served on the local level. We give a very unique perspective of the North and the South together. And I think that's important because people want to get caught up in the flash. They want to see the sizzle reel and, the sound bites. But really, governing should be boring. It should be just the basics, conservative principles being applied in your state to make your state better.
Aaron,
and that's not something.
do you think you guys will have the muscle to beat the presumptive nominee that's out there already? Not
Who,
mentioned.
who are you talking about?
I don't know, some special needs person.
The only candidates that I know that are in this race are Jim Medrick and Ted Dabrowski, and I like to call them my competitors, right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we need to combine at the end. If Jim's the winner or Ted's the winner, we're going to get behind them and we're going to win because that's really what Illinois needs.
Yeah.
And I think we're underrepresented when you're looking at our House and Senate seats and those. But the governor's mansion is a very powerful tool that can make generational change in Illinois. It's 2,200 appointments. I mean, I can tell you right now, the first thing that we're going to do is going to be very similar to President Trump, where we start signing executive orders. We're immediately opting in for education. We're going to be removing all the agency heads and putting them back in with quality people. We're not going to be concentrating on DEI and everything else.
What about the tampon machines? Are you going to remove the tampon machines from the boys' bathrooms?
They shouldn't even be there before. When I was in high school, we didn't even have doors on our stalls.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? You couldn't do number 2 without having somebody watching for you because you had no privacy.
Yeah.
And now you're having, these different things. You bring up a really good point, Terry. My son is epileptic. And we're fortunate enough to go to a good school here in Palatine where he had a swimming pool. And what they did was when he would swim, they would have to have a spotter up in the stands. So if he had a seizure in the pool, obviously he could drown. So, the spotter was there. But you know what we didn't do? We didn't get rid of the whole pool, right? We didn't change all of the rules because one kid, had a challenge.
Yeah.
And I think that the way that we do education is we should be concentrating on every child so they have the resources they need for that individual, whatever the case may be, if they're epileptic, if they're diabetic, if they have gender dysmorphia, or whatever the case may be. But we don't go and change it for the other 99.9% of the population. And especially with the girls and boys and girls bathroom. I mean, that really rubs me hard. I have 3 daughters.
Mhm.
And, my issue with that is not that I don't feel for the kid who is, the transgender kid. I certainly do, and for their families and everything else. But my daughters, when they were in high school, they were uncomfortable with their own bodies with other girls, let alone bringing a boy into the room.
Yeah.
And I think
Sure.
that, the thing that upset me is there was no buy-in or talk with the actual kids that are there. The parents got really involved, of course, and the administrators is, but nobody was talking with the voice of the actual kids that are in there. And I think that voice should have been the loudest of all of them.
Mhm.
When you see people standing up like Riley Gaines and talking about the experiences that they have, I think that puts that and frames it in a perspective that's palatable because, Republicans aren't a monolithic group. We care about everybody. I mean, you'd be inhuman if you didn't care about the human struggle of the immigrants that came in. I do,
Mhm.
right? But and I feel for everybody. I mean, my heart opens for everyone. But I think that we need to use the right policy, and I think we have to use the right tools. We need to fund things correctly and give everybody an opportunity if to be successful because that's what America's about. But I think people get too caught up in a lot of the divisive things that separates us, and instead of concentrating on things that we can all agree on. And I think
You
that is
you,
what
you
Dan and I
agree
bring to play.
you agree that we shouldn't have a sanctuary state, right? I hope.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think that, people argue about the enforcement that's happening now with immigration. And my argument to that is they're just enforcing current law as it currently stands. Right. So the Democrats had an opportunity. They had super majorities in the House and the Senate, and they had Joe Biden as president. They could have changed immigration law. They could have built up borders, and they could have stopped the millions and millions of influx of people that, and
Yes.
again, not to their own fault. Those people are just looking to, seek a better life. I get it. My dad came here in 1974 because he wanted a better life, but he did it the right way. So how do you tell all of the
Yeah.
legal people that came in and did the process and took the class and learned
Yeah.
English and
Yeah.
everything else they needed to do that everybody else just jumps the line? I just don't think it's fair. Do I think that the dreamers should be here? Yeah. I think that, I can tell you that if my dad was illegal and he got deported and I was born in the Philippines and then moved here at 6 months old, I don't know where to go in the Philippines. I can speak the language a little bit, but I wouldn't know what to do. When you get a speeding ticket, you don't give it to the kid in the back seat. But I think that everybody else needs to go back. They need to get back in line. I think they should be given an opportunity, to share in our success. But I think we need to do it in moderation. And so we don't
Yeah.
overflood our schools. We don't overflood our public resources, like we saw in Chicago to a detriment. We don't, do things without a strategy and a plan to make sure that we can take care of those that are in here. I mean, if you're in
Well,
Stroger Hospital in city of Chicago and you break your arm, you're used to 7 to 8 hour wait time to get an X-ray and a cast. Now you're lucky to get out of there in a day and a half,
Yeah. Yeah.
good
right?
Lord.
That's a problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
yeah, I mean,
stepped
and
up.
it's all the other added problems from being a sanctuary state, like not allowing law enforcement to cooperate with the feds. Like right now, we're not talking about picking up, the family that's over here that's economic migrants. Though personally, I think we do need mass deportations at this point. But right now, we are talking about criminals, people that are already convicted of other crimes. And when you're not allowing state and local law enforcement to cooperate, instead they're being released back in the streets. Well, that makes things more dangerous for everybody because now the feds are going to have to go to their apartment, go to their home, pick them up. Other people are going to get arrested in the process. Not to mention some of these guys, especially when we're talking like Trendale Agua and some of the other gangs that are up here. It's only a matter of time before there's a shootout in one of these buildings because ICE is there to arrest a known criminal to deport them, and some innocent person or ICE officer is going to get killed in the process because of these sanctuary state policies.
Hey, Aaron,
Well, that
on
brings
the
up two
last
really good points.
wait,
Go ahead.
before you finish that, but for the remaining like 10 minutes, I want to go back a little bit about Aaron and clear the air and some of the bullshit that's going around about you. And I want people to hear from you directly, right? Because I'm tired of defending you. I'm not tired of it. So, what you want to answer my question, and let's spend the
Sure.
rest.
You know what? When you sign up for public office, you have to open yourself up for any questions in your full path. And certainly there's been some questions regarding my past, and I'm happy to answer it.
Yeah. So first of all, if you owned a strip club, I'll be pissed that you didn't invite me, and I didn't know.
Yeah. No, I've never owned a strip club. What people are talking about is when I was younger, when I was in my early 20s, I took pictures of two young ladies that were airbrushed. I thought they were pretty, and I took a picture and I had it up on my MySpace page. If you remember that, before they even had Facebook.
That's rolling
And
back like 20 years.
we're rolling back, and that picture has been used against me from every campaign since 2009 on today. When people can't hit you on issues, and when they can't talk to you about policy, and they can't talk to you about what you're going to do better for Illinois, when they're upset because you're doing it for the right reasons, I'm very fortunate to have a good business, and I strive to be a servant leader. They're going to hit you on dirt, and that's fine. The people of Illinois know who I am. They've seen me. I've been able to get elected, for the last 18 years to different offices, in spite of that. But no, I've never owned a strip club. I've never even had a liquor license.
Mhm.
That's just all
Yeah,
political
yeah,
cannon fodder.
that would, and another question, and I remember we talked about it a while ago that I think you used to do like club promotions, right? Like just
Sure.
promotions in clubs, which is not a escort service or whatever. Address
No.
that bullshit spin that's being said about you as well, and explain the
Well, no. After when I was an athlete in college, I had some success and went on to the Olympic Training Center, and had some success there. Had made the world team, and had the privilege of representing our great country in Malaga, Spain, on the world team. After I came back, like every other 23-year-old, I like to have a few beers, and I like to enjoy my young life, because most of it was dedicated to athletics. And so people are trying to distort that whole part of my life before I had kids, before I had a job, when I was very immature, before I had my faith, and trying to paint me in a negative picture, because they can't beat you on the real issues. Um, and so they try to take a picture of me from 24 years ago, and change the narrative. The person that was 23, 24 at the time, and the person that's before you at 47 is a lot more mature, more understanding of policy. And I didn't have 6 kids, and I didn't have a beautiful partner and a nice house in the burbs. And now that I do, and I've had that success, I want to give back to my community. And I think that I have a skill set that's pretty good at what I do as far as policy, and politics in general. And I want to use the skills that I have to better the community around me.
what
And
about
that all in one day, and I'll go back to being a grandfather probably at that time.
yeah, what about the website that Dumb and Dumber keep bringing up? There was a web ad.
You have to be more clear.
There was a
There's so many dumb and dumbers out there.
well, you
Yeah.
know who Dumb and Dumber are, but they keep bringing up some old web email address or something that they
You
keep
know, here's the
throwing at
thing.
you.
There's a lot of characters that are in Illinois that benefit from fractures. They're political consultant groups that they get paid by the Democrats. There's a lot of plants. People don't really understand the real dirty side of politics, right? They don't know how the sausage is made. Well, I do, and I know why it tastes so horrible. It's because you have a lot of bad actors that aren't going to do anything.
Sure.
I try to keep away from all the noise, and they can say whatever they want to say. Their audience is incredibly small, not as small as their brains or their intelligence. But
Mm.
that's why I don't raise their name ID. And that's why I
Yeah.
don't talk about them, because they're irrelevant. And if you can't stream yourself from the noise, and if you don't have a thick skin, politics is not the game for you. You should find
Bingo.
something else. I mean, I believe we need all kinds of people, and specifically for those people that you're probably referencing, I think the world needs them. The world needs finger painters too, right? We need all kinds of walks out
Yeah.
there, and that's cool. They can play with their crayons while the rest of us go and govern and make our communities better.
I personally, everyone knows 35 years ago I got in trouble. I changed my life. I'm not proud of who I was when I was in my 20s. I'm proud of who I am, all the things and the challenges I've overcame to become who I am today. Then I got these clowns in our own party trying to destroy me for something I did 35 years ago, instead of looking the accomplishments I made in 35 years and who I
Right.
am as I sit here today. And the same stuff, like my whole family was a Democrat, right? I was raised a Democrat. I was never an active Democrat my whole life, ever, nothing Democrat. But I was raised a Democrat. My dad worked for the city. I think you were at some point in time a Democrat as well, and they keep trying to, use that
Oh,
against.
actually, I was never a Democrat, but
Oh,
that's
okay.
okay.
So I'm
Good,
sorry.
me
There's a
too.
lot. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. That's right.
Yeah, I was never a Democrat.
There's a picture
But,
of you and
you know,
Clinton or something. They said that,
yeah.
right? That something.
Well, Terry, I've had the opportunity to break bread with you, when we were in DC for the inauguration. And what I think I would tell people is that, just like me, when I'm different than I was when I was 22 before kids. And I think that the person that you were, you certainly evolved from that. But I think people should be looking at your heart. You're out here trying to help the community. You're doing it in your way through your podcast, and through your activism. And you go into places where you're not necessarily wanted, to try to shine light on the waste, fraud, and corruption, and the hypocrisy of the Democratic left. And I think that you should be applauded for doing that, because it takes a lot of bravery in order to do it. And I think that so many people try to look at your negatives to bring you down, and you've done a great job of, keeping the high road on it. And I've got to meet your wife, and I've gotten to meet, the people that surround you. And I think you are certainly a different person. I mean, everybody makes mistakes in life. Some are more challenging to overcome than others, but I think you've done a good job of it. And I'm not going to pay you lip service here. You know me. I'm not a butt kisser.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, we need people like you too, fighting in the way that you do, and Mike, and doing your podcast and your forums, because you talk about things that the legacy media doesn't. You talk about things that are actually happening on the ground that I think people know, and you use your forum and your audience to do it. And I think that's commendable. And so if people want to talk about what Terry was doing before Terry grew up, then go ahead and let them talk. The rest of the people that want to see positive, that want to keep people in Illinois, that want to do good things, will see that you're a servant leader as well, and they'll respect you for it, like I have.
Yeah. Well, thank you. One more thing.
Sure.
The last election cycle, we all got destroyed, except who? Except who? You, right? I mean,
That's
why don't
correct.
you talk a little bit about that? Explain your strategy for all these people that are criticizing you, and you're the only guy that was standing after the disaster.
Yeah, what Terry's reference is, in April 1st of this year, in 2025, we had our midterm elections. And I live in suburban Cook County, which everybody knows is a Democratic stronghold. My township and I, who I serve as a highway commissioner, were the only ones in Cook County that have a supermajority Republican township board. And we did that by leveraging our strength as an organization and our campaign skills and our fundraising ability with the Democrats. And we said, hey, we'll give you one, we'll take seven. If not, we're going to scorch earth and we'll take them all out. But we could save everybody a lot of hard time and headache by doing that. And the reason we made that agreement is because I looked at the political wins. I saw the math. I saw that Trump lost Palatine by 20 points. We've had so many people that have aged out and moved to other states and have passed away due to their age group, and their homes have been bought up by people from Lincoln Park and from the city. And when they move to Palatine, they bring their Democratic voting record with them. And we made a very strategic move that I was highly criticized about for cutting that deal. But if we didn't have the strong political force to be able to leverage 7-1, we would never be able to do it. But what you saw is everybody else lost. DuPage County lost 38 out of 39 seats. Cook County lost 100%. I mean, everywhere around me became Democratic strongholds, right? We lost everything in Elk Grove. We lost half of them in Barrington. Schaumburg completely lost. We only lost their supervisor and all their trustees. These are local areas around me. And it's not because they didn't have good candidates. It's because of the political climate and because of the disarray of the Republican Party. But I believe that winning matters. And for those that criticize my strategy, guess what? We're not raising taxes in Palatine. We're not moving all these leftist policies that JB Pritzker is pushing as he auditions for president of the United States in 2028. We're still going to be running a conservative area, and we're going to keep our property taxes down. And if they want to come back and try to take us out in 2029, God bless them, because we're showing that we know how to govern. And that's an example of the things that we want to do statewide. People are like, well, how can you do that if you negotiate with Democrats? Well, I think that makes us more powerful as governor and lieutenant governor, because we have super minorities in the House and Senate here in Illinois. They have super majority. So if we could take 7 out of 8 in the state, I mean, that's a pretty good deal, right? Now we got super majorities.
Yeah.
If we can outfox the fox, that's how you win. Because all those great people that were candidates can't legislate from the couch because they're out.
Yeah.
If you want to make real change, you need to be able to win. And then when you're in the position of government, you need to make those conservative movements to better our communities. And that's exactly what we're doing. And I can tell you right now, I'm not apologizing for it.
Yeah.
I'm not apologizing for anything for winning. 3 weeks after that election, I was elected again, Cook County Republican chairman by my peers, which is the second largest county in the United States and the largest county in Illinois. So, the actions and the respect from my peers speak louder than words.
Yeah. And so you're just to be clear, you're not a spy for Biden, just like I'm a spy for Biden, just in case you know that.
I'm a very strong conservative that wants to win.
Sarcastic.
No, I get you, Terry. But people, I appreciate you asking these questions and that you have the candidness to ask me them on your forum. But I'm not, like I said, I'm not apologizing for winning. In fact, if somebody doesn't like the way that I win, then they can go kick rocks.
Yeah.
We're here to make positive movement and change, and they can all go. They're not. What are they doing? They're not doing anything.
You've got to adjust your strategy as times change. If you want to win, you've got to evolve your message and adapt to the situation you're in, or you're always going to get left behind.
Yeah, he was the
That's
last.
right. I mean, we can't depend on the state party or anybody else to be able to come in and save us, right? Like
Yeah.
real people save themselves, and that's what we're going to do. And Darren Bailey and I are committed to saving Illinois, and we're going to put us on the right track. It's not going to be overnight, but I think that if we get the message like we're getting out here today, and amplify that to the residents of the Collier counties, and we get the support of our southern base, um, we could take Illinois and make it the greatest state and the greatest country the world's ever seen. But we need everybody's support in order to do that, and we have to do a really good job and work really hard in order to be successful.
Mhm. Very good. So, we have the last fifth. I want you to stay on and wish this guy good luck. I think it's his first time running, Mr. Pearson. You know how hard it is for anyone to run in the state of
Sure.
Illinois. So, is
Well,
he on?
he's actually having issues connecting. I'm texting back and forth with him right now.
So we had issues last time. So I think if you don't mind, we got a few minutes to go.
Sure.
You
Give me
know,
the hard questions, Terry. You've been throwing me softballs all day. You know what I mean? You and Mike are taking it easy. I mean, they're going to think that this is all set up and that you guys are Democratic.
and listen, I know you. I know you well. And honestly, I mean, I never even asked you, and I was being sarcastic anyway. But I always thought because of what everyone's telling me that you were a Democrat, and you know what I mean. I never thought you were a Democrat in plain. I mean, I was raised a Democrat. I wasn't a Democrat. I mean, you know, my mom and dad, my whole neighborhood where I grew up, the Italian Union. That's all I knew. But I was never.
But Terry, the Democrats of your day are Republicans now, my friend.
Yeah.
Right?
Bingo.
You know what I mean? With the
My
Trump,
mom and dad are
Trump election, they're
85.
coming over.
My mom and dad are 85. They started through the Obama. You know, actually, my dad flipped earlier. My mom, you know, once Obama got in, she was like, "Oh my God," you know, and they were lifelong Democrats, and they're not now. My whole family, except for two.
You know, you have to remember in Illinois, Donald Trump won two Chicago wards. That hasn't happened since Ronald Reagan in the 80s. You know, but that's also the beacon of hope that we have as Republicans, that if we can get those, what we call unreliable voters, those that just voted for Trump but didn't vote for anybody else, if we can activate them, if we can get them to come out, we have a real shot of winning. I mean, take a look at what's happening in New Jersey. Take a look at what's happening in Virginia. I mean, Republicans are making an inroads when they're supposed to be at this Democratic wave because of the pendulum, because the Republicans have all levels of government right now. Um, you know, there's a lot of opportunity for those that want to concentrate on winning, that don't want to just grandstand. We have so many candidates that are just out there for them. They
Mhm.
put their picture on flyers and they talk about them and talk about them, right? If we want to win in Illinois, we need to start talking about the
Yeah.
people and what we're going to do for them, right? And that's where the emphasis should be, not on what you can do for yourself. I mean, when you have Nancy Pelosi and you have these Democratic leaders that, you know what I mean, that make $185,000 a year being a congressman and are worth tens of millions of dollars, they're doing something wrong.
Mhm.
Right? That's where the corruptions come in.
I got a tough question for you. I
Sure.
think. You know, we're in disarray, right? We're in a war, and you know, and my personal belief, we need a wartime leader during a war. You know, somebody like Joe
Right.
Biden or like a Illinois version of Trump. When are we going to get? And this is, I'm saying this respectfully because you're nice, but when are we going to get rid of Kathy Selvey and get a general that's used to fighting a battle in a war? Because until we have a good leader that excites and motivates us across the board, we're just it's
Well, I think you need to get a general for sure, but I think you also need to get a chess player, and I think you need to get a parliamentarian combined, somebody that knows and understands the rules and the warfare and understands strategic moves, and not just making the first move, but understanding what the next 5 or 6 moves are.
yeah.
Right? I think that is there, and you know, I know Kathy Selvey gets a lot of attacks, right? But you know, one thing I'll mention for her is she's been one of the best fundraisers as a state party chair that we've ever had in the last cycle. We've raised more money than we did outside of when Bruce Rauner was funding the whole Republican Party back in 14 through 18. You know, is Kathy perfect? Certainly not. I think that, you know, she would be well served to listen to people across the state and maybe just not in her ecosystem in Lake County. That's something that I've talked to her about. I'm like, hey, you know, what's good for you in Lake is not the same thing that people in Central or Southern Illinois are thinking about.
Mhm.
And we need to make inroads and concentrating on races that we can win because of the gerrymandering that we are. Instead of spreading all of our troops thin, maybe we concentrate on 2 or 3 races where we can make significant inroads and then build from there. Because if we don't have wins, nobody's going to invest in our party. Nobody's going to invest in a candidate, right? And that's why, um, you know, that we have such a hard time fundraising, because people are like, why not just throw my money in the street? But to Kathy's defense, she puts her money where her mouth is. She's donated hundreds of thousand dollars to the party. Do I think that all of it has been most efficiently used? Probably not. But I'll give her credit for stepping up and doing that. It's a thankless job. I was her co-chairman for quite a while, as you remember, Terry, and and what you step into that light to try to lead, your force forward, and then half the party retreats after you get the first, shot fired. Right, that's a problem.
Yeah.
I always say that I'd rather have a coward today than a traitor tomorrow. They just tell us where you're at and what you're willing to do.
Right. Right. That sounds like
But
John Curran.
there's
But,
some room there.
sounds like John Curran. But so one of the things, one of the things, one of the things that I think is important. So obviously, it's a layup. In politics, you need money, right? So I get that.
Sure.
But I think what we need is we got to figure out to have somebody that you respect to help unify. We're divided between the establishment or the rhinos, the grassroots. The grassroots are divided amongst the grassroots. And if we had some figure that could unify us, because the Democratic Party, they're well organized, well funded, they got indivisible, all this shit going on, right? What do we
Mhm.
have? We have the grassroots and we have the establishment. And to me, the establishment, the leaders of the party are supposed to bring the money and power, right? And then on the
Right.
grassroots, we're supposed to bring the people and passion. And we had that's dwindling. I saw it in the little time I've been. The people are getting fed up, so
Right.
we need to unify because another thing we don't understand is that the Democrats have the unions too, above all the other shit. They send out emails. When I worked
Sure.
in the film business, I'd get an email where to go show up. You know, and so until we get our act together and figure out they have somebody that's going to unify us, excite us, motivate us. Yes, you need money. That's important. But also, it doesn't matter if you have money if you don't have foot soldiers. If you have an army without soldiers, then it doesn't matter. And I think we need to find somebody
Yes.
that's going to do that.
Yeah, but Terry, that's where I probably disagree with you just a little bit on that, because I don't think that we're looking for a savior, and that's really what you're kind of describing as a savior, that someone's going to come save us. I tell my 10-year-old daughter, real princesses save themselves. I think that we as a party need to take it upon ourselves and not be waiting for the life jacket to be tossed to us, a life preserver tossed to us. That we need to take it upon ourselves, and I think that's part of why Darren and I are doing this, because Darren's group, for the most part, didn't care for me, and my group didn't really care for Darren. I mean, he's got that heavy accent. Hello,
Yeah.
friends, right? That doesn't really, it doesn't really resonate in suburban and
Up
city
there.
people,
Yeah.
because they're just not, they think this
Oh,
person's from
God.
Arkansas,
Yeah.
right? And my voice, and I talk really fast.
Yeah.
People in Southern Illinois is like, look at this city slicker, right? But I'm telling people, I'm like, hey, look, we have an opportunity here. You got the farmer and you got the Dell, right?
Mhm.
Like, we joke about it, or because they started out with the farmer and the charmer, and I didn't really like that too much. I didn't think it was one thing, but I hear what you're saying. I think that we need to unite about issues and things that we all agree on. And I think that we have to understand that this is a pinnacle opportunity for us to have some success and to build a strong infrastructure and a base before we can start worried about just having massive, takeover of Illinois. It's going to have to be incremental. And I think the first part starts with this governor's race coming out in 26.
Yeah. So just to be clear, because I think you misunderstood me, I am not looking for a savior, not even remotely. I'm looking for a general, and when I say a general, someone that you respect, his courage, vision, playing chat. They have to have all that. When I say general, it just doesn't mean a military general. All those elements that make a general who he is. And then when you go into a battle, you're following a general that you respect, that you trust. You know what I mean? And you motivate and excite. If you want to call that a savior, I'm not, like during the Revolutionary War, I don't think they call them saviors. You have men that know how to lead and get the people to go above and beyond because they respect you, they trust you, and they believe in you. That's what, and if that's, I don't call that necessarily a savior. I think it's a little different, was what I'm trying to explain.
And maybe
the biggest thing.
I'm
Go ahead.
Oh, just let me interject one thing here real quick, because maybe I might be missing something here too. But one of the things that we've talked to several other candidates running for various positions around the state. Something we keep hearing is when they go out and they talk to constituents, that a lot of them are kind of like demoralized right now. Even though I really don't think they should be. I think right now things are turning around, but they're having difficulty getting the volunteers, the people they need in the street, whether it's door knockers, people making phone calls, even just sending emails and sharing the message. That there seems to be like a lot of demoralization in Illinois specifically that we're not seeing in other areas. They just feel like the game's rigged, but they need somebody that can inspire them to get out there and actually fight for something again. And I think the person that does that, that's the person that's going to save Illinois.
I would actually tell you that I have a completely different experience.
That's good.
For us, I mean, when we put out 2 emails and a couple Facebook posts, and we got 14,000 signatures that came to us. We're the one of the only campaigns that didn't pay for one signature. When we
Wow.
put out our endorsement piece, sign up to be to endorse our campaign. We haven't released it yet because we're, obviously trying to figure out what we're doing with the campaign and
Yeah.
what's going to happen after, the funeral this weekend. We have over 3,000 individual endorsements that we put one Facebook post and people went to our website. We have over 750 small dollar donors that have already come in with $15, $25, $30, along with some, big guys that have dropped $30,000 checks. What I'm seeing from our campaign side is excitement that we have the people, we have the troops, that people are like, hey, Aaron, we were a little apprehensive about you, but Darren really pitched for you. You know what? And I'm telling my people, I'm like, hey, you know what? He's not just a farmer. He's a businessman. He's got some really good points. And so we're seeing a lot of people that are flocking to our campaign for kind of the same things that you said, Terry, that they see that this is an opportunity to have historic team running. I mean, when have you, two governors running, right? Two governor candidates combining to run. That's not something you can do. And I think that Darren and I are trying to lead by example by putting our past differences aside, but even more importantly, putting our own egos aside, which if you're a politician and you're on this podcast, I love hearing the sound of my own voice, right? We put our own egos aside to do this. Darren has
Sure.
got hundreds of thousands of dollars of acres down there. I've got a good business over here and great family. We're doing this for the true reasons because we think we can make a positive good to Illinois and use our skills and assets to do that. And we want to make this place a better place than when we found it. And we mean that authentically and truthfully.
I have one last question for you because we're
Sure.
coming out of time. What are your thoughts on? Do you think you're going to get any help from the RNC? So I,
Yeah,
do you?
I do. I
Yeah.
think what I'm, again, our campaign obviously was put on hold by the tremendous tragedy that the Bailey family had just experienced. But what I can tell you is that we're certainly picking up steam. And if Darren decides that he wants to run, I mean, you're anybody that gets in our way is going to get hit by a freight train. And again, we're not apologizing if you get hit. If you lay down or get in front of the tracks, you're getting run over. And that's, I think, the leadership that we're bringing, that the unapologetic way that Darren and I are putting our campaign. We want to get everybody on board, but if you're not on board, that's okay. We're just going to still keep on moving.
Mhm.
And I think that there's going to be a lot of national money that wants to come in because they want to prevent J.B. Pritzker from, getting the rise and running for president. And I think that we're going to get Democrat and Republican money alike. And when we get into the general election, I don't care where the money comes from because we need to be able to get it to get our message out. And, I'll give you an example. I have a tracker now. Right. When I go to events, I have a tracker that follows me around and records everything else I say. I don't see trackers at anybody else's events, right? Because they're not taking the other campaigns very seriously. They know that Darren Bailey has statewide name ID. He had it before the tragedy. And if there anybody that never heard his name before the tragedy, it certainly knows it now. And that's concerning. And JB Pritzker knows. And let's talk about it, right? He spent $30 million playing in our primary last time because he thought Darren was going to be the best candidate to run against him. I would love nothing more to take the $30 million that he invested in 22 and stuff it down his throat and show him that you raised the profile of the wrong guy. Because Darren only knew how to govern Southern Illinois with me on the team and we working as a partnership. We can govern the whole state and we get the right message through. Because when we're up here south of I-80, I'm giving the message. We're down south of I-80 and they want to talk about bean heads and they want to talk about getting the crop in. They're going to talk to Darren. When you want to talk about, crime and education and unaffordability and suburban cook and down in the city, that's my neck of the woods. So that's, that was an unforced error that's going to come back and haunt J.B. Pritzker in this cycle because he invested in the wrong candidate because Darren's got his act together. He learned, what are the things he did really well, but even more, he learned from the loss of what he did incredibly wrong. And we went over the stuff and we had a very impolite conversation. I said, Darren, this is what you did, this, and this. And I go, frankly, Darren, you endorsed my opponent during that primary. I wasn't going to do anything to help you, but now I'm on the team. Now I'm activating my people out here in the city, and we're going to go and we've got a whole different political climate. You got Brandon Johnson pulling in single digits. You got J.B. Pritzker for the first time underwater. Historically, governors that run for a third term, have a tremendous amount of difficulty. So the political climate is going to be right for us to do it. We have to get our message out. We have to do the things that aren't fun. It's not about going around in rallies and taking selfies with people. We have to activate our base. We have to get our messaging correct. We have to stay disciplined, and we have to go in there and kick some ass, right?
Yep.
And that's what's going to happen if we want to get any success. If everybody else wants to go on a vanity tour, that's up to them. They go and do that. But if Darren calls me up and says, Aaron, this is happening, then people should watch out because you've had the other candidates on board. I'm the lieutenant governor candidate, right? You've had the other gubernatorial guys go. Imagine what we're going to do when you take Darren and put him back on, you know what I mean, on the campaign, and we both go out and we spread around Illinois giving this message to rooms that don't necessarily want us in there, but we win them over. That's what's going to happen, and that's why we're going to win. We're not, you know, shrinking violets here, right? I mean, we're good people. We care about our faith, but we're really ready to take, you know, kick ass and take names.
And that's what Illinois needs right now is fighters, people that aren't going to shy away from that message, that aren't afraid to tell Pritzker and the rest of the guys they're idiots and they're running the state and the city into the ground. And that's what I think what it's going to take to win. I think a lot of what we've heard from constituents there is they want a real fighter. They're tired of these wishy-washy, reach across the aisle, shake hands with the enemy and make deals because that's not working for them anymore. They want somebody that's ready to take them to the mattresses and win this war once and for all.
That's exactly.
You know, Mike, I don't know if Terry told you this, but I fought 13 times in the cage after I left the Olympic Training Center. Cage fighter. And people often say to me, they're like, how are you supposed to be the candidate for lieutenant governor when you're a former cage fighter, getting in there and fighting humans? And I tell them, being a former cage fighter makes me uniquely qualified to be a Republican in Illinois.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what it's about. Because if you can't take a shot, if you can't punch and you're not ready for that, you're in the absolute wrong business, especially running against the richest elected official in the United States. That's what it's going to take, and that's what we're prepared to do.
So the way you just described yourself in the last few minutes here in the aggressive willingness to fight and all that stuff is like what I was trying to explain. It wasn't a savior. It was a fighter.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm certainly a fighter. I mean, you know, I'd had over 100 boxing matches, 3 2-minute rounds like Butterbean. Those were my boxing matches. I had 11 cage fights, 13 cage fights, won 11 and 2. And, you know, have that wrestling, judo, MMA fighter background. But my body can't handle that anymore, Terry. I'm 47 years old, right? But my mind is still sharp. Yeah. And we're going to go and we're going to run a really well-disciplined, metrics-driven, fully funded campaign to unseat the current governor of Illinois and bring positive change and, you know, to Illinois and do it for the people. And I really believe that.
Well, that sounds great. And you know, as we close out here too, if Darren decides to run, I'd love to have him on the show. You know, it's got to get over.
Darren will definitely be on the show. You know, when the president called him, I mean, certainly the condolences were the part. But I think,
Sure.
You know, in the end of the conversation, because I was fortunate enough to be able to listen in on it, he said, Darren, you're a warrior. Exact word, you're a warrior, and you should fight on and you should continue on with your campaign. And I think Darren's going to take that to heart. I would be surprised if he doesn't come out swinging. But I think right now he needs more, and he needs to take care of his grandson. He needs to get the house in order. But I feel very confident that I can pick up my load and his load and do it. And I think I can represent us very well. And I appreciate the opportunity that you both have given me to do that here on the show. And I think that, you know, everyone should really be watching out because, you know, most people, when they lose an election, they take the ball and they go home. And then everybody else says, hey, you know what? He can't win. He lost one time. Well, there's a lot of people that have lost the first time. They came back and had that Rocky Balboa show. Everybody forgets Rocky lost in the first movie. He didn't win till the second one, right? And you learn a lot more through a loss than you ever did through a victory. And I think that's what's going to propel us. We have the name ID. We're going to have the funding, and we certainly have the policy, and we have the vitriol to be able to be successful because we are fighters, and that's exactly what we're going to do, and that's what you need to be able to beat J.B. Pritzker.
Well said.
Exactly.
Well, you want to encourage our audience to, you know, especially keep Darren Bailey, the whole Bailey family in your prayers right now. They really need it. They're going through a tragedy like most people will never face in their life. And that's on top of being under the media microscope right now. So it's a lot of pressure on them and a lot of, just tragic on a loss they could never have seen coming. So really, please keep them in your prayers.
Yeah, Mike, before you close this out, one more statement I forgot. We talked about, so I just filled out my paperwork for ICE, not as an agent. So sit down, not to be an agent. Right? So I'll be one of the embedded reporters going out with ICE. I'll be able to throw on my old vest and stuff and get some good local footage here for us in Chicago.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, guys, keep posted. We'll put that out on X America News account as well. Get all that shared out for everybody. And
thank you a lot, man. Appreciate it, Aaron. Wish you the best.
Thank you guys for giving me an opportunity to share my story. Sorry for monologuing so long, and I got a little long-winded there, but
do you have a website?
It's great to see you guys.
Do you have a website or anything, or you want?
Yeah, you can go to BaileyForIllinois.com. You can hear about our campaign there, and then you can find me at AaronForIllinois.com too.
Thank you.
We'll get those shared out too. To the audience, thank you for joining us again tonight. Please like, share, and subscribe. Help us to grow so we can bring more people the news the mainstream media doesn't want you to hear. And we'll be back next week on Tuesday.